Shalom Israel, and welcome to another edition of Yasharada's 20-minute breakdown, where I'll attempt to break down the scriptures within 20 minutes. But first and most importantly, as always, let's give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Waha, Rakah, Kadash, and the Akims and the elders in the highways and byways pushing this word in truth and sincerity. All praises to you too. And the elder women teaching the younger women, all praises. And the camps making videos, edifying the body, pushing it out there in social media, and every social outlet there is, all praises to you too. Now, what I am going to touch on today is the history of our people, because as we are in October, and they always say this is Black History Month, if they labeled us with that terminology, black, which is a byword, because when you look at it, black is a color. It's we ain't black, we are different shades of brown, but the world classes us as black. So I will use that terminology for this lesson today. Now, as this is supposed to be Black History Month in October, where they always say they remember Black history, but what do they normally do as they talk about Black history? They start from the 16th century, the transatlantic slave trade. They always start our history from there. But what happened before that? Does our history only start in the 16th century when we were taken from the west coast of Africa and by ships and taken all around the world and put in slavery and servitude to build up other people's place and their nation, and build up their wealth, while ours diminished, theirs grew. Now, this is the thing with the Black History Month. It always starts normally, even in schools, education, all that, always starts from the transatlantic slave trade. But what about before? Before that, were we a people before that? Yes, we were. Now, the thing with the Bible, the Bible, this book is, when you read it correctly and precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little, you'll find that this book is actually our history book. This is a book of laws, statutes, and commandments. Yes, it is, but it also shows us our history. It shows us what happened to us before the transatlantic slave trade, right up to the transatlantic slave trade, and after, and even to this day, what's happened to us now. I mean, when you read Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, everything that is listed in there is still happening to a certain people today. Now, when you go through the curses in the book of Deuteronomy, you'll find it only fits one certain nation or class of people. That is what they call the so-called black people. I mean, it does, get the Native Americans and, the Seminole Indians, because they are part of also the 12 tribes of the children of Israel that were scattered abroad through the four corners of the earth. Yeah? So this book, when people tell you this is a white man's book, that means they don't know the Bible, because this talks of your history, our history, and it goes prior to 1619, which is where, when they do so-called Black History Month, where they normally start from. Now, I'm going to pick it up at the book of Jeremiah. This is my opening verse with the book of Jeremiah, because there's something Jeremiah said, and I'm going to read it when the lesson starts. And then we're going to go through it, and let's see if all what I read fits anybody else apart from us that, ended up eventually in the transatlantic slave trade, taken all across the world and being deposited in all nations around the world. Okay, so with that said, let's get into the lesson without further ado. So I've got my timer as always, and we're going to start in the book of Jeremiah. So in 3, 2, 1, we're away. Now, straight in there, let's go. First of all, my opening verse, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 2, verse 14, and it reads, Jeremiah 2:14. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Now that's the verse. So I'll read it again because it's a very short verse, but there's a lot of meat in there when we go through what Jeremiah was speaking of. And I'll read it once again, just so you can that can soak in, because Jeremiah is asking a question here. And it's going to be apparent soon when I go into the lesson why he asks that question. And it reads, the book of Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 14. And it reads, is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Right, now that's the verse, yeah? Now, let's rewind all the way back. Let's go back to Exodus, when the children of Israel was in Egypt, and when Moses come under the hand of Moses, the Most High, under the hand of Moses, delivered Israel out of Egypt. Let's see what they were in Egypt, and then let's go through some of these things, and let's see why Jeremiah asked that question, the prophet Jeremiah. So let's go to the book of Exodus, chapter 1 and verse 13. We're picking up at verse 13. And it reads, this is when the children of Israel were still in Israel. This is when the children of Israel were still in Egypt. That's what I meant to say. Pardon me on that one. Now, listen to this. The book of Exodus, chapter 1, and we'll pick it up at verse 13. And it reads, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. Verse 14, and listen to this. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick. So now we know who was building them pyramids. And in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field, all their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So you see, rigor, it was with, hard bondage. So they were slaves in Egypt, yeah? So as we know now, there were slaves in Egypt, and like the Most High, delivered them using Moses, delivered them out of Egypt. But now when they got into the wilderness, they still had customs of Egypt in their hearts. They moaned, they complained, and all those that actually came out of Egypt. Because remember, the Most High promised them, when you read, further in, promised them a land flowing with milk and honey that he was going to give for them as an inheritance. But they complained in the wilderness, and so have you. So all the people that originally came out of Egypt, the Most High killed them all off in the wilderness, save two, Caleb and Joshua. They're the only two original souls, like as in adults, original souls that actually came out of Egypt, that actually made it into the promised land. Now I'm going to now pick it up from that point. Now, I'm going to go to the book of Judges to show you something, because even when they were now got into the promised land, the Most High still puts things there to prove you, to see where your heart is at. Now watch this, This is the book of Judges. And I'm going to read chapter 3 and verse 1 to begin with, then I'll jump down. Now listen to this. This is the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 1, and it reads, now these are the nations which the Lord left, here we go, to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan. So you see, the Most High still left nations to prove Israel, to see whether they're going to keep my commandments or whether they're going to go off on their own. Because remember, they only just came out of Egypt, and they just got into the promised land. Now listen to this. I'm going to pick it up at same Judges 3. I'm going to go to verse 3 in the same chapter. Read 3 to 4, then I'm going to read 5 to 8. I just want to show you something here. Listen to this. This is the book of Judges, chapter 3 and verse 3. And it reads, namely 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hamon unto the entering in of Hamath. Verse 4. And they were, listen to the point why he left them there, and they were to prove Israel by them, to know, here we go, to know whether they would hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Now you see that? So the Most High left them to prove Israel, to see if actually they will do as they were commanded, like keep the commandments, the statutes and laws. But let's see, what did they do? Listen to this. We're still going to stay in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 3, and now let's take it up at verse 5. Now listen to this. And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and Jebusites. Now here's the point. Verse 6. And they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. You see, the children of Israel, what do? No sooner than they get in the land, they start looking at the other nation. That looks interesting. We don't have to keep them laws. Their God says we don't have to keep their laws, them laws. And we start serving their gods. Now listen to this. Now, verse 7 of Judges 3. And it reads, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgot the Lord their God, and served Baalim and the groves. Verse 8. Therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of Chushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Chushan-Rishathaim 8 years. So you see that? We just came out of Israel. What did we do? I mean, we just came out of Egypt. I don't know why I keep saying Israel. We just came out of Egypt into our land of Israel, promised land. And then next thing we do, we start serving the other nations' gods. And then what do? We go back into slavery. Obviously, they cried unto the Most High, and he delivered them out. Now, I'm going to pick it up at 2 Kings chapter 2. Listen to this now. I'm going to show you a repetitive theme here. So we're going to go to the book of 2 Kings chapter 17, chapter 17, and we'll pick it up at verse 6. Listen to this. And in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and in Habar by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. And verse 7, for so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods. You see, they start worship other gods again. Yeah, verse 8, watch this. And walked in the statutes of the heathens. So you see, walked in their laws and their statutes, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. So you see, no sooner they came out, they went serving and they got off again. And they went back into slavery. Right? Now, watch this. Now I'm going to show you, then they cried unto the Lord again, and he delivered them. I can't go into it fully because time doesn't permit, but I'm going to give you a quick showing a repetitive theme. So he delivered them out, so they're back into their land. Now watch this. This is 1 Chronicles 9. This is chapter 9 and verse 1. Listen to this. 1 Chronicles chapter 9 verse 1. So all Israel were reckoned by genealogy, and behold, they were written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. Here we go. Who were carried away to Babylon for their transgressions. Now you see that? So they transgressed again, and Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, carried them away. What were they again? They were slaves in Babylon. Anyway, after 70 years, fast forward 70 years of servitude and to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. I'm going to pick it up from there at let's go 2 Chronicles chapter 36, and we'll take it at verse 19. Now check this out. This is the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 36 and verse 19, and it reads, and this is what happened in Babylon. And they burnt the house of God, and break down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the places thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. Verse 20. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants. See, they were slaves, they were servants to him and his sons, until the reign of the kingdom of the Persians. So you see, they were serving Nebuchadnezzar until Cyrus rose up. Now we're gonna take it from there. So you're right. So we're gonna jump to quickly now to Ezra, the book of Ezra, chapter 9, verse 9. Watch this. Ezra chapter 9, verse 9. And it reads, For we were bondmen, yet our God has not forsaken us in our bondage. See, they were slaves, but has extended mercy unto us in the sight of the kings of Persia, to give us a reviving, to set up the house of our God, and to repair the desolation thereof, and to give us a wall in Judah and in Jerusalem. So you see, this is when Cyrus rose up. The Most High stirred up Cyrus's heart to put it in writing for the children of Israel that can return back to Jerusalem and build back up the house. Yeah, but then after that, now Darius came into power. Now, before that, let me rewind. Let me go to watch this. Let me go to Ezra 1, chapter 1. Let's go to Ezra's chapter 1, and I'm going to read 1 and 2 first, and then I'm going to jump to 6, just to show you the transition. And it reads, Ezra chapter 1, verse 1, and it reads, Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, see, just what I was saying, of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus, verse 2, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So you see, the Most High stirred up his heart, so he let the children of Israel go back to Israel, back to to Jerusalem, and build back up the temple. Now, anyway, after Cyrus died, Darius took over. So let's pick that up at chapter 6, verse 12, and it reads, Ezra's chapter 6 and verse 12, and it reads, and the God has caused his name to dwell there, destroy all kings and people that should put to their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God, which is at Jerusalem. Now here's the point. I, Darius, have made a decree. Let it be done with speed. So Darius, now when you read into scriptures, Darius found basically the decree that Cyrus had written, and he made a decree to see it through. So the temple built back up. They're back in their land. But what did Israel do as always? And you see now, you see what he said about the earlier verse. He said that Jeremiah will be fulfilled. Now this is why Jeremiah said, which was my opening statement, which is my opening verse, which is Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14, when he had to ask, because there was so much slavery in Israel, he had to ask, was Israel just put on this earth to serve other nations and to build up other nations? Were we just here to be slaves? I mean, what's our purpose? But you see, we have to realize we keep going off, and that was our punishment. That's the part we don't get. Now Darius is in power. Now, after Darius, now we had, Darius was the Persian and the Medes. After that, now we have the Greek captivity, which is Alexander the Great, then Antiochus, whose surname Epiphanes. Now we're going to pick it up from there at Maccabees, which is the books that were removed, because when you go into the Bible, you don't see anything much of Alexander the Great and the Greek captivity. But if you have an original 1611 like I do, it's in here in its correct place. Now, this is the book of Maccabees, chapter 1. I'm going to pick it up at, I'm going to start actually with verse 1 and 2, just to give you the context. Listen to this. Maccabees, first Maccabees 1, chapter 1. And it happened after Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Mede, that he reigned, in his stead, the first over Greece. Verse 2, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. Now you see, showing you now that Alexander the Great rose up and he started to, slew the kings of the earth and everything. And I'll just read verse 5 just to show you something. It says, and after these things, this is first Maccabees chapter 1 verse 5, and it reads, and after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. So this is now when he's on his way out. Yeah, so let's jump down now, where Antiochus now is taken over. So I'm going to pick it up at first Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 41. This is now Antiochus now, surnamed Epiphanes, who's now taking the place of Alexander the Great, who's now ruling in his stead. Now, this is first Maccabees chapter 1, verse, I'll take it at 41, and it reads, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. Yeah? So you see that? All should be one people. Let's actually read on. Verse 42, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Verse 43, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion. You see, that's where religion comes from. It was man-made. So his religion, and sacrifice unto idols and profane the Sabbath. So you see, that's now what they started to do. I'm going to jump down and pick it up at 49. So this is first Maccabees chapter 1 verse 49. And it reads, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. Verse 50, and whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. So you see, if you didn't consent to what the king said, you would die. You were put to death. Yeah, so this was the Greek captivity where they led away Israel because they sinned once again and they joined themselves and they did all kind of profanities. Yeah, and again they cried to the Lord, and the Most High sent a savior or a prophet, and well, you have to read that yourself. I've got to get it moving. Time's almost running out. Now let's go to the time of the Messiah. Now this is Luke 21. Let's pick it up when the Messiah came on the scene now. Luke 21 chapter, I'm going to pick it up at chapter 20 to 24, and it reads, Luke chapter 21 and verse 20, and it reads, and when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Verse 21, let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now that's the same mountains that Mary and Joseph fled when Herod sought the Messiah's life when he was a child. Yeah, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. Salaki. Verse 22, for these be the days of vengeance, and all things which are written may be fulfilled. Now you see this, let me read on up to 24. Verse 23, but woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. Verse 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captives into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentile until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now you see that? So it's showing you Jerusalem will be trodden down of the Gentiles till the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And now when you fast forward now to this day, so what did they do? They disappeared into the west coast of Africa. Now, when you link that up with Deuteronomy the 28th chapter, you will see now we were taken as slaves from there, taken around the world, sold into slavery, and how you have this modern day situation we're in today. I hope you got something from that. I've timed out. This is Yasharala. Shalom. We out.